This is TLC-To-Go.
Okay, let's jump straight into this. If you're teaching in the health sciences, medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, nursing, any of those fields, you definitely know that the classroom or the clinic, the lab, wherever you're teaching, it throws up some unique and, well, often pretty complex challenges.
Oh, absolutely. Getting that critical information across effectively,
Yeah.
making sure students really understand, preparing them for practice. Yeah, it's not always straightforward.
And you want to know, truly know that what you're doing is making the biggest possible difference for your students' learning, right?
Exactly right. It's about moving beyond just sort of delivering content and hoping it sticks to actively looking into how learning is happening in your specific place and why some things work or, why they don't.
Yeah. And that brings us neatly to the material we're diving into today. It comes from the UTHSC Teaching and Learning Center.
Ah, yes, the TLC. From what we can see in the source material, this center seems like a really valuable resource hub for faculty there at UTHSC. It looks like it's specifically set up to support their teaching.
How so? What kind of support?
Well, it seems they do it through various programs, events, different resources. Just looking through the source info, you see things like webinars mentioned, more formal stuff like their medallion program, even access to literature via their library. Seems pretty comprehensive.
Sounds like they're really focused on building up that culture of educational excellence. And the specific topic from their materials we're digging into today is something called the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, or SoTL for short.
SoTL. Yeah, it might sound like, I don't know, another bit of academic jargon maybe, but honestly, at its core, SoTL is incredibly practical. It's directly relevant to, well, pretty much every faculty member who teaches.
Okay, so our goal for you listening, based on this TLC material, is to really unpack what SoTL actually is, understand why it's especially important if you're teaching in the health sciences, and then, crucially, walk through the actual steps you can take to get started.
And also highlight some specific resources mentioned in the source that can help you out along the way.
Great. So where do we start? How does the source actually define SoTL?
Well, the simplest way to frame it, based on the source, is to think of SoTL as research. Plain and simple. But unlike the kind of bench research or clinical research you might be doing, this research focuses specifically on what happens in the learning environment.
So not about discovering a new drug or understanding a disease pathway. It's about looking closely at teaching strategies, student understanding, maybe curriculum design, anything connected to the educational process itself.
Precisely. And the number one goal of doing this research, as the source really emphasizes, is always improvement. Improving your teaching, which then leads to better student learning.
That intention seems key. It's not just research for research's sake. It's scholarly work with a direct purpose for teaching.
Exactly, a pedagogical application. And the source gives some good examples of the kinds of questions SoTL research can help you answer. Makes it more concrete.
Yeah, let's hear some.
Okay, so maybe you tried a new teaching method. Perhaps you, flipped your classroom for a really tough topic, or you brought in a new simulation exercise.
Right.
A SoTL question could be, okay, what effect did that specific strategy actually have on student learning compared to, say, how I taught it last year?
That makes sense. Measuring impact. What else?
Or maybe you notice students consistently hit a wall with a particular complex concept. Happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
So a SoTL project could focus on how that concept is being taught. You'd analyze the methods, the sequence, the materials you're using, trying to figure out where the breakdown might be happening. You could also look at differences you're seeing, maybe. Like if you teach multiple courses or have different groups of students covering similar stuff, and you notice they perform differently or engage differently. Yes. A SoTL question could explore exactly that. What are the differences in learning between students in course A versus course B on topic X? Or maybe how do learning approaches differ between our traditional entry students and our non-traditional students in this particular program?
And another point the source brings up is starting with what's already known.
Absolutely fundamental. So a key SoTL question might just be, what does the existing literature, the published educational research actually say is the best practice for teaching this skill or concept?
So SoTL isn't always about inventing something totally new.
Not at all. It's often about rigorously testing and adapting those established best practices, but within your specific teaching context, your students, your program, your setting.
That's a really powerful idea. It's like applying a research mindset to our teaching, using evidence to guide what we do in the classroom, just like we expect evidence-based practice in the clinic or the lab.
Precisely. The logic is identical.
Mm.
If evidence is critical for what we teach and how we practice clinically, shouldn't it also be critical for how we teach?
Yeah. Hard to argue with that. Okay. So we've got a decent handle now on what SoTL is, the kinds of questions it tackles. But let's be real, in health sciences academia, everyone is stretched thin. Clinical duties, research labs, admin tasks, plus teaching.
Time is precious.
So why should a busy faculty member invest time and energy in doing SoTL? The source actually lays out several pretty compelling benefits.
It does. And the primary benefit listed, which I think most educators would agree is the most important, is really straightforward.
Yeah.
You do SoTL to improve your own teaching.
Which leads directly to more effective student learning.
Exactly. By systematically looking into your own practice, you get insights that let you tweak things, refine what you do, and ultimately make your teaching better, more impactful.
And related to that, in academia, showing the impact of your work is so important, right?
Yeah.
So SoTL gives you that concrete evidence of your effectiveness as an educator. Instead of just saying, oh, I think my new simulation went pretty well, you can potentially say, look, based on my SoTL project, the students in the simulation group scored significantly higher on this specific competency assessment.
It gives you actual data. Data to back up your efforts when it comes to, like you mentioned earlier, promotion and tenure reviews, or even just in conversations with colleagues or department leadership.
That measurable outcome then connects directly to the next benefit the source points out, the chance to publish or present your work.
Right. Educational research, including SoTL, is a recognized field of scholarship. If you complete a SoTL project successfully, that gives you material you can share. Maybe at conferences, health sciences, education ones, or broader education conferences, or you could publish it in peer-reviewed journals focused on teaching and learning.
Which then leads right into the final and maybe the most outward-facing benefit the source mentions, sharing your work so other people can learn from you.
Yeah, this is huge. If you figure out a really effective way to teach, say, a tricky anatomical concept using some novel approach, publishing or presenting, that means your colleagues, whether they're down the hall or across the country, can potentially benefit from what you learned. They can improve their teaching, too.
It creates a kind of ripple effect. Your local investigation adds to this bigger pool of knowledge, helping to advance health sciences education overall.
And the source makes a point that the results from these kinds of investigations, when they're done rigorously, form the basis of what they call scholarly teaching.
Scholarly teaching. I like that term. It suggests teaching that isn't just happening by chance, but it's informed by evidence, it involves critical thinking, and it actually contributes back to the evidence base.
That's it, exactly. It's intentional, evidence-minded teaching. And the source really underlines this with a pretty powerful quote. It says, "The systematic creation of rigorous knowledge about teaching and learning is a crucial prerequisite to responding to major challenges facing academia."
Wow. Major challenges facing academia. Let's think about that. Evolving technology, more diverse student populations, pressure to integrate new competencies, shifts in healthcare delivery that change how we train future professionals.
Yeah, the landscape is constantly shifting.
And without a solid understanding of how people learn, how well different teaching methods work, how to assess outcomes properly, it's incredibly tough to navigate those challenges effectively. So for anyone listening who's thinking, all right, I get the value, I even have a teaching challenge nagging at me, but how do I actually do a SoTL project? The good news is the source provides a clear sort of 7-step process, a practical roadmap.
Let's walk through those. Step 1, identify your problem.
Right. This is where you pinpoint that specific teaching issue, that question about student learning, or maybe an observation you've made in your course or clinic.
And the source suggests starting small here. Maybe focus on just one tricky concept or one specific teaching activity. You don't need to try and revamp your entire course for your first project.
Good advice. Keep it manageable. So pick something you're genuinely curious about improving, then step 2.
Step 2, identify your research question. Once you've got the problem, you need to shape it into a clear, answerable question. This turns that general worry into a specific focus for your investigation.
Can you give an example?
Sure. So if the problem is, like, students really struggle with cardiac physiology, the research question might become something like, does implementing interactive case studies improve medical student understanding of cardiac physiology compared to the traditional lecture format?
Okay, that makes it much more focused. Step 3 is review the literature.
Yep. Before you jump into designing your own study, you need to see what's already out there. What have other educators or researchers studied related to your question? What methods did they use? What did they find?
So you're building on existing knowledge, not starting from scratch.
Exactly. The source implies this helps you refine your question and, avoid reinventing the wheel. Foundational for any research.
Makes sense. Step 4, design your study. This sounds like the planning phase.
It is. This is where you map out your investigation. What data will you need to answer your question? How are you going to collect it? Surveys, maybe tests, observations, focus groups? Who's involved, like the students in your course? And importantly, how will you ensure it's all done ethically and practically within your teaching context?
Lots to consider there to make sure the data you get actually helps answer the question. Okay, step 5, conduct your study.
This is the action phase. You carry out your teaching intervention, if there is one, and you collect the data you plan for back in step 4. This is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Putting the plan into action. Then step 6, analyze data and draw conclusions.
Right. Once you have the data, you need to make sense of it. What does it actually tell you? Are there patterns? Does it support your initial ideas or maybe contradict them? What conclusions can you draw about your teaching or about student learning based on the evidence you've gathered?
And finally, step 7, present or publish your work.
Yes, and the source really emphasizes this as a vital part of the whole scholarly process. It's not really enough just to do this study for your own benefit. The idea is to share what you found with others.
How might you do that?
Could be through an internal presentation, maybe a poster or a talk at a conference, or aiming for a peer-reviewed publication.
So sharing is what closes that loop, allowing your insight to potentially become part of that bigger evidence base for scholarly teaching we talked about earlier.
Exactly. So those 7 steps give you a really solid framework for turning a teaching reflection into potentially a formal piece of educational scholarship.
And importantly, the source material makes it clear you're not expected to navigate all this alone. There are resources available to help.
Definitely. The source specifically mentions thinking about using a SoTL planning worksheet. Just having a structured document to guide you through defining the problem, framing the question, thinking about the design that can be super helpful, especially when you're just starting out.
And for that final step, presenting or publishing, the source points to some external resources too, like the Kennesaw State University's Teaching Journals directory. Sounds like a practical tool for finding where your work might fit.
Yeah, and it also references an annotated bibliography of journals from the AAMC Medical Education Scholarship Group, MESRE. Another great place to look for relevant journals, especially in med.
The source also highlights resources right there at UTHSC through the TLC itself, which is great. They mention things like a specific webinar titled Turning Teaching Activities into Educational Scholarship.
That title says it all, doesn't it? Directly addresses how you can frame your classroom innovations as SoTL projects.
And the mention of the TLC Medallion program, specifically noting SoTL as part of it, suggests there are structured ways for faculty to really engage with this and get recognized for it, too.
There's also a mention of something called MedEdMentor. The source describes it as an AI-powered platform designed to help with medical education research.
An AI platform. That sounds interesting. How might that help?
Well, potentially with things like literature reviews, maybe even aspects of study design. The source suggests it's a tool to assist, which could be really valuable, particularly for people new to SoTL.
So it sounds like support is available on multiple fronts: planning tools, journal lists, institutional programs, even new technology platforms. It makes the idea of pursuing SoTL feel, much more achievable.
It really does.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up this deep dive, let's bring it back to you, the listener, the educator in health sciences. Think for a moment about a specific teaching challenge that's been on your mind.
Yeah, maybe it's a concept students just consistently get wrong, or difficulty assessing a particular skill effectively, or maybe a strategy you try that you're just not sure is really making a difference.
Pick one specific challenge. Now, how might you start thinking about investigating it using these principles, these 7 steps of SoTL that we've discussed?
Even just taking that first step, clearly defining the problem, and maybe trying to frame it as a research question, that alone can start to shift how you think about your teaching, can't it?
Absolutely. Because remember that powerful quote from the source? In the face of all these major challenges academia is dealing with today, systematically building up rigorous knowledge about teaching and learning. Well, it isn't just a nice to have.
The source calls it a crucial prerequisite. Engaging in SoTL lets you improve your own teaching, yes, and boost your academic career, sure. but it also makes you an active player in creating the very evidence that will shape the future of health sciences education.
It's about teaching with intention, investigating with rigor, and then sharing what you learn for the benefit of students and colleagues everywhere.
Well said.
We really hope this deep dive into the UTHSC Teaching and Learning Center's material on the scholarship of teaching and learning has shed some light on what SoTL is, why it matters for you as a health sciences faculty member, and maybe given you a clearer path and awareness of the resources out there to help you get started.
Thanks for joining us for this exploration of educational scholarship.
And we hope you'll join us again for future deep dives into other topics. Until next time.